Thank you all for gathering this evening. It's been a while. There's been some changes. So I think what we're going to start, yes, and the room is different. This was actually a recommendation from Homeland Security to improve exits from the room. So escape routes here, 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 behind you if you have to. So, yeah, we just started it. So we're working out the kinks, but eventually I think it's going to be great. So I think what we're starting with tonight is sort of a scene setting on the Runlet property and where we are. I would like to have a discussion about, there is no building aid in the governor's budget, and so how much work does it make sense to do so that we can bring that discussion to the board if we're not going ahead without building aid. We want to keep this project moving forward, but we also don't want to do work that will be outdated if the board's not moving without building aid. So I will turn it over to Tina.
Yep. Thank you, everybody. All right. While you're driving? Yep. I'm starting. So we're just going to go through a little bit of history. You guys have a packet in front of you that talks about the existing conditions at Runlet. There's been so much work done since 2017 that we just want to refresh everybody's memories because we've been doing it and sometimes we forget. So
not work done in the building. But
no, work done on our part.
Project, yes.
Right, to study different options. Yep. And, we looked at renovating that building. We looked at repairing that building. So we just wanted to kind of refresh everybody's memory, what came up from that. So there was, study done of all these parts and pieces of the building. We went through it architecturally, structurally, mechanically, plumbing systems, fire protection, electrical, technology security, and all of the site. So it's all in this package here if you want to do some reading before sleep tonight. And you can't really see. Most of the parts and pieces got pretty poor grades, and some of them got, really deficient grades. So if you go to the next slide. These are all the spaces in orange that are undersized compared to what DOE wants you to have for your school. So that's the majority of the classrooms, and also the athletic spaces and the NAR. So all of those, if we did a repair or renovation to this building, would remain undersized just like they are today. If you get into making things bigger, like say you combine 2 classrooms into one to get closer to your square footage, then that kicks you into having to upgrade the building structurally in terms of seismic bracing. So they would have to go underneath the building and dig in new footings and put in bracing. So that adds a lot of cost, and it's pretty impossible to do. So you would leave things pretty much the same size as they are now to make it affordable. And just a reminder, the team clusters right now aren't working educationally the way we want them to. All of the science labs are kind of clumped together in that square up on the screen. And then the team clusters are kind of scattered throughout the building. So that's really not ideal. And in a renovation, your science labs are staying there. You're not getting team clusters the way you want them. So that's something we can't fix in that sort of repair option, renovation option. There's a lot of existing conditions that aren't code compliant. There's, issues with all of the doors from the classrooms swing into the corridor, so they block the egress path. The envelope doesn't meet energy code. The stairs don't meet the current building code. The railings, some of that we could fix. Structurally, there's, lateral bracing systems that would have to be put in. Like I was explaining, if you started tearing down walls, you would have to be doing those kind of upgrades to bracing. And then any kind of roof repair is going to trigger upgrades for wind loading and snow loading. The codes have changed. So you're going to be doing some structural upgrades when you replace that roof.
Replace, not the patching that we had planned for this summer.
You could patch here and there without doing that, yes. But if you're going to take the roof off, which really needs to be done, then that you would have to do some upgrading to structure.
Right, and you'd also have to remove all the mechanical. You'd also have to remove all of the mechanical equipment that's on the roof to re-roof, because
We'll show you
most
some
of the
pictures.
ductwork is being run on the roof.
Yeah. So these are some pictures. You can see the doors when they swing into the hallway like that. You can imagine if everybody's kind of moving quickly to get out of the building in an emergency, that's not, a great situation.
And I know we've retrofitted some solutions, but these are all doors that you have to open to lock, right? Which
Correct.
is not recommended for security
Correct.
purposes.
Yep. Go ahead. The building has a tremendous amount of doors in it. We don't really design buildings quite like this anymore because it's so sprawling. It's got just doors everywhere. You could upgrade the hardware so that it's, egress only. But again, it would be safer. In the new design that we really have kind of that nice main street and then the pods. We don't have these sprawling wings. There's also issues with the way the entrance works in the front. The admin isn't directly adjacent to it, and there isn't a secure vestibule. So in a new school, you would design, the admin to be right next to the door so they could visually see who's coming to the front door. They would admit them into the vestibule, which would have another set of locked doors, and they would take their license from them through a bulletproof kind of teller's window like you'd go to a bank. We could do some of those upgrades, but you'd have to put a new addition on to kind of retrofit that entrance sequence. There's a lot of accessibility issues in the building. I know that they've tried to, fix as many as they can, but in a building of this vintage, it's really kind of challenging. The doors, because it's got a lot of block walls, in order to make things, have the right clearance for push and pull to meet ADA, you have to start tearing down block walls, and that just gets really challenging. In a new building, we would design it so that, your walls would be, steel studs and gypsum walls so that you could move things around in the future and make it more flexible. In the 60s and 70s, they built things with block walls, CMU, and that's really challenging to change up and, make work for today. A lot of the casework in the classrooms doesn't meet ADA. The science labs don't meet ADA. Toilet rooms are challenging. The elevator's too small. So those are some of the things that would be challenging to fix. You can see some of the issues, with the mechanical system that Matt's tried to keep running over the years, the ductwork that's up on the roof. There's a lot of envelope issues that we could, you can replace the windows in a renovation. Those things are pretty simple, but there's other parts that are more challenging. You can see the skylights are cracked, the things are leaking. It's not great. And then these are some of the shops and the science labs. You can kind of see the condition of the school. In a new building, it would be great to have a lot of natural light in your wood shop and your maker spaces. It's a rough space. So just as a reminder, the board had put together, some of the ideas that they wanted to have educationally in new building. And, a new building could meet all of these. Again, we talked about the team clusters and how important that is for middle school teaching. Making the classrooms optimal sizes that meet the DOE requirements, having areas for assemblies for the full school, pep rallies, team meetings, a building that's secure, that they can keep track of guests coming in and out, and building materials that are safe. The 60s and 70s were not great for building materials.
I did just want to point out, too, all of the information that we're sharing tonight has actually been shared in previous public community meetings. And so each slide is actually, we've sort of identified the date that this information was originally presented.
And these reports are on the website, too. So you can, thank you, Holly. You can look these up and find more of the details on the website, too. Okay. Again, so this is like a list of all the architectural upgrades that would be required in the repair. And, these things, again, don't get you anything educationally. So they're all going to cost a good chunk of money, but you're still going to be left with a building that doesn't function the way you need it to. The structural and mechanical reports that you have here, you can read through them, but some of the highlights, as I was saying, like a major renovation would trigger repairs structurally that we would have to put in more bracing. Anything, having to do with the roof, there's more stringent code now for snow loads and wind loading and all of that. That would all, play into this. And anything with a deeper structure is going to give you an even lower floor to ceiling height than you already have in there. So then running all your new mechanical ductwork is going to be really challenging. You probably end up putting it back on the roof the way it is now. You can see on the right-hand side, that's all the ductwork that's sitting up there on the roof. And again, it really doesn't last very long when you have to run it that way. So in order to repair your roof, you've got to take that all down, put it on the ground, hope it survives that move, re-roof the building, and then put it back up there. Again, any upgrades to the mechanical system, you're going to need to upgrade your entire electrical system because that's, pretty much original to the building. And then, same thing for plumbing and fire protection. Things are really original to the building. So, you really need to get in there and replace everything. There's nothing to be salvaged. And there's...
Yeah, I think
Can you go back to the plumbing and fire protection?
Yep.
Thank you.
Okay. Can I answer any questions?
I think for those of us who've gone back and looked at some of the original discussions, one of the big discussions was the bones of the building, and the difference between a concrete 1960s structure versus the brick high school, because they're two buildings, why aren't they the same in
Right.
terms of being able to renovate and value in renovating? And I just wonder if you could expand on that.
Sure. I mean, this building, when buildings that are built in the 60s and 70s were built really quickly, after the war, and they basically, didn't put any insulation in them. They're built with, CMU walls, so it's not easy to make things, a little bit bigger. Something that's built with steel and steel studs, you can simply, take down a wall and move it somewhere else and infill. This building doesn't have that quality. Even buildings that are 100 years old have more, better bones worth saving because the way they built masonry walls back then, they had 3 bricks wide of masonry. So you could keep that, that was providing enough insulation for you. But 60s and 70s buildings are really challenging.
I had a quick question. I didn't see any notes in the report. Are there fume hoods in the science labs?
No.
Okay, thank you.
Nope. No, and all the science labs have that sort of old fixed casework. In new science labs, we kind of put fixed casework around the perimeter, and then we have movable lab tables so you can reconfigure it into a lab setup, or you can have it be a classroom setup. This is all fixed and doesn't meet the ADA code, for accessibility.
And why couldn't you move the science classrooms with the clusters if you were doing?
So the science classrooms are bigger than the general classrooms, and so, the general classrooms are undersized for general classrooms.
Right.
So then, to make it bigger, you would have to take 2 general classrooms, and again, then you get into all that structural reconfiguration where you have to go into the basement and sort of dig new foundations and put in bracing. So that gets really complicated.
And if you were doing it, how much of this could be done with students in the building?
You wouldn't be able to do that with students in the building. You would have to phase this over a number of years. We had sort of done a quick look at it and done a phasing diagram, and we showed it to Harvey, and they were saying, it's probably close to 5 to 6 years that you would do this over a period of time, and you would get modular classrooms in, put them on your field, and you'd probably do it like a wing at a time. You'd move the kids into those modulars, you'd close down that wing. Over a summer, you would take all the hazmat material out of it, and then you would proceed probably 12 to 14 months to do each piece of the building. And doing that with new systems is really complicated. Putting in a new HVAC system and electrical systems that way would be a real challenge. And then when it comes to like your cafeteria and your kitchen, I don't know quite how you do that over, that would take another year to 14 months. So you would have to cook food in a different school and, bring that over to the kids and they would eat in their classrooms. Same goes for the gym spaces. Those would have to get renovated over 12 to 14 months. So the kids would be out of those athletic spaces for that period of time.
And I know we haven't really updated the estimates since the original comparison, but at the original comparison, it was pretty much the same for renovation versus
Correct.
building new.
Correct.
Is it your sense that given that the changes in construction costs, that renovation has become a cheaper option?
I don't believe so. And if it's slightly cheaper, you've still got to take into fact that you're not getting anything educationally for that savings. You're still stuck with a school that doesn't quite work for you educationally.
Keith, do you have any thoughts on that as well?
I would concur with Tina that there were times in which renovations and new builds would flip-flop between which one's the more economical way to do it. They've been holding pretty consistent, and I would suggest that the phasing construction adds significant impact, which translates to dollars because of duration. So if we just did a quick analysis of that, because we weren't involved during this time, but we just did a quick analysis of what this phasing would be. It'd be approximately 7 phases, and that adds duration, which then adds cost, and let alone the impact on the environment for the students and faculty. So the short answer is I wouldn't find any savings in a renovation project of this magnitude, which is shown
I'd
in
like
there.
to
Rick?
add to this.
Yes,
a little
please.
bit. Rick, use your mic.
Thank you.
Sure, I'd like to add to this a little bit. This, with my experience in construction, and at the end of the day, all you're going to get is a patchwork quilt. You're not going to get anything close to what you're going to get, regardless whether you do the Rundlet site with a new build or the broken ground site. You're going to get 100 times better if you go to the broken ground site, because you get all of your fields and so forth, expansion capabilities for the next 200 years, and you're already choking at Abbott Downing for special needs space and so forth, and if Rundlet goes away, that problem's solved. So there's no way that renovation would give you anything close to what this community wants at a price that you could even begin to think about.
Thank you. And while I agree with you on the broken ground site, I fought that battle and I lost it. So we have to move on, unfortunately.
But with the funding situation being what it is and the state not willing to kick in anything, I'm not sure that battle's lost.
Could you just make sure you use your mic?
Certainly.
Thank you.
If you look up on the screen, that was sort of our quick look at the phased renovation repair. The first phase you would build maybe a new boiler plant so that the boiler plant right now is in the middle of the school, so you'd put in that new system in there, and so that's P1. And then systematically go through the building and renovate as, every, 10 to 14 months basically. Again, that last P6 phase with the cafeteria would be really challenging. That may need to be phased into 2 sections actually. But that's what it would look like. And you can imagine you'd have the contractors in there with you for 5 to 6 years, right, with the kids on the other side of the, plastic off wall. So I think it'd be really challenging.
Okay. Questions?
If you were to take that approach, where would you even put the modular classrooms? And would there be enough room then to do the staging for the construction? And where would teachers park?
Yep,
Where
good
would kids
question.
go outside?
Yep. So if you look at the screen here, we were imagining, you could put the modulars where those blue boxes are, and then you'd want to connect them into the building. So that connection back to the building would change as you obviously were doing the phases. So you could connect, into the longer wing first, and then after that's, under construction, you'd have to move the connection to a different wing, and then that red kind of dashed area would be where the contractor could have lay down space and access from the back through the neighborhood. So they would have maybe a little bit of play space kind of next to where the NAR is, where the softball field is in the front. So it'd be pretty challenging.
Mr. Richard?
You said the boiler on the last thing. Are we talking about using fossil fuels in this?
That was just a kind of quick, if this is a repair renovation, I don't know if you would go through the process of trying to put in geothermal wells. Suppose you could. That would happen probably in that area cordoned off. You could put wells over there. But again, that would just add more money to this.
And time, which translates to money.
Yeah. But you could.
Additional questions? I know a lot of you have looked at all the documents, so this isn't completely new. I'm going to ask building committee members for a sense of, the phasing funding, even if it might be more costly, might be more possible without state aid. So does anyone think that this is something that the board should be considering? Ms. Fox?
I've read this document several times over the last few years, and I'm thoroughly convinced that the existing building doesn't meet the needs of the students currently for educational purposes, and that trying to repair the existing school is just going to end up costing all the residents of Concord more money in the long term, because they're still going to have an aging building. And even if you replace all the systems, the blocks themselves are aging. Everything is still old and not in good shape. And as they mentioned, mid-century construction practices are not the same as they were. So a 100-year-old building is actually a much more structurally substantial building than a mid-century building is that's newer. So no, I don't think renovation is a good idea.
Okay. Anyone have a different opinion or want to express any opinion?
I just have a question.
Sure.
I think this building is terrible before I ask my question. I think investing in this building is totally the wrong direction. That being said, tell me about the two different ways in which the city of Concord pays for either building. If it's phased in, we pay for it over 7 years. If we build a new building on the site, so in terms of like how taxpayers will be paying for it, does it hurt less in our tax bills? Not
Well,
that.
I'll let Jack defer that, but once you start taking about big bonds like that, I don't know how much. When we looked at the HVAC at the high school, for example, we looked at spreading that over a couple of years, and it actually was less cost effective. But Jack, do you want to respond to that?
I think your stop and start, as we looked at this at the elementary project, 15 years ago, was you just hit one whole generation of students as you take over that time. But if you're going to do a bond, it gets into, there's probably going to be multiple bonds that would happen, and then you're going to hit at different times depending on the years of what those interest rates are, whether you're at peak years or lower years. So you're going to have these various different bond payments. And does it also make it a possibility when you do a phase that you go so far you stop because of whatever economic issues, and then do you continue? You can't control what it's going to do because it's a phased project. I mean, you're going to commit to the next 7 years to this, and are people going to? It's a risk in my mind. But
The only other thing I'd add to that, and probably Keith can talk about it more than I can, but when you look at projects that are, 5-6 year projects, it's challenging when you hire subcontractors for those, because they don't know what's going to happen with the market for that many years. So they're going to probably put a lot of contingency into their bids because they don't know what the market's doing. And, would they be, better served on a quicker job? Maybe.
Yeah.
So maybe you don't get the bidding pool that you had hoped for either.
Yeah, the project generally becomes less attractive, if you will. So then your subcontractor selection becomes smaller, which is then not an advantageous environment to be in for getting the best pricing. So long duration projects, we don't want to be in your backyard just as much as you don't want us in our backyard, and the same thing goes for our subcontractor base. So the project that is as minimal phased as possible and shortest duration as possible is the most appealing to any subcontractor base and, frankly, any construction manager's base.
One other thing to consider is, okay, you're targeting this site for 7 years. Going back 15 years, one of the reasons we took out what we did at the elementary school was to try to create a gap for taxpayers. You already are at a high school that has 30 years since its renovation. So what this does is push the snow pile out, and then you have other schools that are aging. Beaver Meadow, 1987, 88, right? And then they're going to start needing work. And then you're just in this perpetual construction. And we tried to give taxpayers a break when we created the gap between elementary and middle. And unfortunately now with these delays, you're starting to push into schools, other schools. And that thing's a beast, 565,000 square feet. And that's going to need a renovation and probably in the future. So the longer that moves on, this is elevated. And you could have a generation of kids going through there and they go into the high school and then they're under construction. That's the unfortunate part.
I'll make the point again, I think I sort of already did, but I think the disruption of this to students who would be in the building, to the teachers who would be trying to get to and from work every day, to, I think expanding the timeline, I think already, I've made my position on this clear in the past, shoving the building into that bottom left or top left corner is going to be a challenge in its own right. But if you're doing construction on the building that students are actually in, I think that's just going to be untenable for that period of time for the kids and their educational experience.
Other comments, questions? Okay. Tina, do you have more on?
We do have more.
Yep.
Okay, so we have started to look at putting the middle school on the South Street site. So we've done a series of studies. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah.
So we've done a series of studies. We're trying to salvage as much of the original design as we can, but have it make sense on the South Street site. So we've kind of taken the big blocks of the building, like the academic bar, the gym, and the theater, and kind of shuffled them around on the site. And we've tried multiple orientations, and we've looked at multiple ways to access the site. So I just wanted to give you kind of a little sense of our process here and what we've been doing. And then we took those initial studies and we were working with our landscape architect who was looking more closely at kind of site circulation. And these are sort of the 4 options that they developed. And I just want to walk you through the option that is sort of the preferred approach at this point. Which is this, and maybe I can zoom in a little bit here because it's a little hard to read.
And I think one of the major things you're going to notice as Holly goes through this is you see the road back through the middle of the site. And one of the things we talked to them about, the way we had it originally with the road kind of looping around the perimeter of the site and then having the bus drop off come in from like Conan Drive, it was basically cutting the middle school off from their fields. And what we had wanted to do with this site all along is connect the kids safely to the green space on the site. And so they had talked to us about, putting that road back in and making it just for parent drop off. I think you're stuck with it the way.
Yeah, there we go.
and bringing the buses in from Conant. So I'll let Holly talk about this.
Right. So here, the access to the site for parents for pickup and drop off would continue to be from South Street, from the existing curb cut along South Street. So we have a long drive, so we still have kind of enough queuing on site that we can get cars off of South Street. The parent drop-off kind of wraps around a parking area for visitors and faculty and staff, and then you're sort of exiting out on Conant Street again, where the existing exit is. Buses, on the other hand, would come in from Conant Drive and kind of travel along that fire access road that's around the perimeter of the site. And buses would be dropping off on the back side of the site. So it was just taking up a lot of room to kind of keep the parent pickup drop-off and the bus drop-off adjacent to one another. So this is a bit of a compromise. I know Jay would love all of his students coming in the same door. And they can still do that here, but they would need to kind of walk around the building to that main entry plaza.
And this is one lane now coming through?
The bus drop-off is one lane. Right?
No, I'm talking about the parent drop-off.
Oh, the parent drop-off is a single lane. It could be a double lane, and it could, you could actually have parents, turn around and exit back onto South Street too. But this is something we need to study a little bit more.
And then the parking, you would get into it from the parent drop-off lane?
Correct.
Yeah, the parking in the front, and then there's more parking in the back in this scenario.
I just worry about that because, I've seen it in the existing parking lot where people come in where the exit
Oh yeah, up at the top to get into the
parking lot.
I've done it myself.
And then is this the Abbott Downing drive here?
That is the Abbott Downing Drive,
And
right?
then the other thing you have is that parents sneak through Abbott Downing and drive, so you end up, it would go down from 4 lanes merging into 2 lanes merging, but still not great.
I think there's ways to not merge with those folks, and I think our suggestion would be to get a traffic study done of this and get input from traffic engineers, because this is really just our landscape architect kind of talking about this. And you can see what this does do nicely, though, is it connects the school to the green spaces and the fields, and you don't have kids, worrying about crossing traffic. And it does keep the buses and the cars separate, so you don't have to worry about kids, running between the cars and the buses like we have today.
Yeah, but having driven this many times myself, the parents will be in a hurry. They will pull up here, drop their kids off here, who will run across here and have to cross the lane. That is what will happen quite a bit.
Yeah, I don't
I
really
don't
like
much
this
care
one.
for this. And the other thing is we have 1, 2, and the bus thing coming into this street, which is way smaller than anything we were looking at Broken Ground, and way smaller than South Street.
We did talk about, potentially putting them back out on South Street, having that be a loop, so they don't dump out onto Conant. But again, I think the traffic engineers would have to help us look at this. The other thing that could happen is you could put, there's going to be a sidewalk adjacent to that roadway. So you could allow for parents to drop their kids off where the 30 is. You see that area there? And then kids could safely just find that sidewalk and make their way up to the plaza.
Does the back where the buses leave, does that go out to Noyes Street? Are the buses then going onto Noyes Street?
Yes.
Yeah, and
Wow.
that
was
was
always
that was the way that we were just showing it before, but we had the bus kind of loop coming down where it says, main entry, like that pink arrow that connects to the fields. That was cutting off all of the kids' access to the fields in the other scenario. And then the other thing was with the road that was looping around the back, we were starting to be worried about, all the balls and everything from the sports going into the road. So that would have to get fenced all the way up and around. It was a tremendous kind of run of fencing. I mean, we haven't scrapped it entirely. This is our, first study of this, and I'm sure the traffic engineers will give us some good feedback, but this is our take on it right now. And it's good to hear all of your feedback, so we're happy to to hear it and entertain
I
questions.
understand what you're saying, but with a loop, but then of course we lose more space. And if you're looping, you're coming through probably Abbott Downing space, you're taking field space, right?
Yeah, the field space is pretty similar no matter which way we run these roads. I think you get kind of the same number of fields if we go back to our final option. You get kind of one standard size soccer, lacrosse, football, whatever you want to use that field for. And then you get a smaller practice field between the softball and baseball where it's dashed. You do get some nice green space for the students in front of the academic wing in the front and in the back of the building. So you can imagine outdoor space, amphitheater space. This does keep sort of the roadways away from the building as much as possible. We'd have to talk to the fire department about sort of not having that road that connects on the right-hand side of the building. Right now we're showing a plaza. So I think there's a way to put in sort of pavers there that could be seen as, pedestrian space, but in an emergency could be used for, fire trucks or ambulance access.
What's the distance from, is there an exit off the cafeteria? And what's the distance to the green space?
The distance to the green space? Oh, it's right there. I mean, it's pretty close. Probably like 50 feet. And, Holly can keep discussing the option if you want to talk about the secondary entrance in the back.
Sure. So the layout of this option that we're looking at right now is fairly similar to the design that we had on Broken Ground, with a few changes. But basically the academic bar remains pretty much the same as it was designed for Broken Ground. One of the priorities too, we've been trying to keep that academic bar with the south orientation because we really want to maximize the daylighting in the academic wing. So in this option, the academic wing faces sort of true south. We have a sort of main entry plaza here. The administration, again, is sort of overlooking that main entry plaza with the media center above it, and then sort of the art spaces up on the third floor above the admin. The theater sort of remains kind of close to the main entrance here, the auditorium and theater, with music wrapping around the back side. And then the gym and the multipurpose room are here. And, we can develop some nice connections from the gym and multipurpose room kind of out to these green spaces. So you can have some direct access to green space, as Tina mentioned, without crossing a road or driveway. And then the difference, though, is that the kind of cafeteria kind of opens up to this courtyard that faces north, and that would be a secondary entrance that can be used for, bus access or for after-hours events. So if people are parking in this north parking lot and they want to get into the gym in the evening, we can develop kind of an entry sequence here from the north.
If I can mention just two things to consider no matter what these options. One is, obviously, we have to go through code enforcement and all for the fire. We know for sure we're not going to need a road all the way around that building, or we don't know that yet.
It's
Like
not,
we had to at Broken Ground.
we need to sit down with the local fire officials.
But
So-
if that were to happen, that's going to also change access.
Right.
Yeah.
We do have a road, that circles, I would say, 75% of the building. And as Tina was mentioning, we have some plazas here, and those could be connected with pavers to get fire department access all the way around the building if that's something that is required.
And the second thing is on an operating expense side of things, as I sit and approve invoices. If we can find a way to dump the snow somewhere without having to haul it off this site, that would be great, because there's already two sites that we pay to haul off snow. But if there's a way, especially I see these long runs, where do you put it without losing parking spots? And then what does the trickle-down effect? So if there's a way to find out where to dump that snow, and I'm guessing there's probably restrictions of putting it near Bowbrook, so you can't, I'm guessing, do that. But, maybe you could maybe make us the snow load real strong on the roof. We can just shoot it onto the roof. And I don't know. Yeah, I'm sure you can. But those two things on each of these. So.
Yeah.
I had a question. I noticed in some of the other renderings and the drawn renderings, it looked like you had included room for a potential fourth pod for expansion. Does this option offer that opportunity?
I think that it's tight in any of the options that we looked at. I mean, it's possible. I think in this option, that fourth pod would have to kind of be tucked in here. So there's not a lot of room to do it. It's challenging, but I mean, I think that's something that we need to revisit. Is that a priority moving forward on this site, because it is challenging?
I mean, I think one of the board's things is we want to make sure it's a building that can last whatever changes happen in the community. And so having that space, you know, because we can't perfectly predict the future, our population may continue, or, you know, things may change.
Right. I think we can move the building to the right. It's like a balancing act between fields and the fourth pod.
Right. I mean, the other thing that you could do is you start to get really close to the existing building if you move the building over. So then you may have to consider a phased construction project where you have to take down the NAR and the gym to be able to move the building over enough to get, you know, a
To
fourth
leave
pod
space
in.
for a fourth.
Yeah. I don't know if you can't really see the existing building on here, but I think if you look at, it doesn't really show up very well. But you can start to see how close we get in some of these options. And some of these options that we explored did overlap the existing building, which is why they were sort of ruled out, and we ended up with the option that we're sharing with you tonight.
Can I ask a question about the fields? My understanding is the middle school currently doesn't have softball and baseball, right? And I know it's something that we all would like, but it doesn't exist. And we also know that there are a ton of kids that are participating in soccer and other sports. If you got rid of the baseball and softball components of the fields, could you get like 2.5 fields in there? Could you get like a half field for an additional practice field? It just seems in some ways, if we're so restricted on space, why are we putting in softball and baseball when it's something we don't even have, and you're not going to have the space you need for what you currently have in this design?
I mean, we can look at that, but I mean, right now they are overlapping the practice field as it is, so it's not like they're taking up a whole lot of.
But you can't use portions of a softball and baseball field for other sports. That's why, because you know.
I mean, one of the things that we need to verify is we need to get the wetlands flagged so we know exactly how much room we have to work with on the east side of the site. So that's something that we're waiting to have happen. And I think once we get that information, we can look at this in more detail.
I think they also put it in the ideal orientation in this layout. So I wonder if you didn't have the baseball and softball, could you rotate the practice field and fit two there, maybe?
That's what I was kind of wondering. Is there a way you could get more space?
Yeah,
for more
that direction will
kids
have to
play?
come from the school and you all, what we're designing.
Yeah, and to be very clear, like, you know, I've spoken to my athletic director, Scott Owen, very briefly, and, you know, this is very different than what we talked about. So, you know, we haven't had any kind of in-depth conversations around what does this mean for our kids with these, you know, this different setup. So I hear exactly what you're saying and thinking that way as well.
And we do have the setups there now, so that would also be taking, and that may just be the consequence, but 2 baseball fields that the city, Little Leagues, and others use. So just to, Mr. Richards.
Yes, can I ask, on this diagram, where do the wells go for the geothermal?
It can go under the parking. It can go under the field.
Okay. So would you, well, you can't,
Parking would be better because you could do it in the first phase.
yeah, that's what I was gonna ask. Do you have to have temporary heating in there until you get that done because of the fact that it's so tight that you can't drill where you're gonna build?
Right. I mean, on this site, you might look at a hybrid system potentially. So you have some geothermal wells and some air source heat pumps, basically. Just because you don't have this sort of real estate that you had out at Broken Ground for a full geothermal system. You know, and it might make sense because, you know, some of your some of your system will be used for those really cold days that you have during the year, and so you might be using the geothermal wells all the time and then use the air source heat pumps when you need the extra heat or cooling, you know. So it might make sense to do a hybrid system anyway. And that's something we'd have to study, you know, and it's all part and parcel to the cost of the building, right? And now that the building costs more at this site, you know, that's something I imagine we're going to study, you know, the options that you would look at for HVAC. The other thing on the table is the tax credits and where we stand with those. Right now, they're still there, but I don't know if they'll stay. As with everything, it's kind of up in the air. So I think it's all worth a second look.
One other thing, I think we're talking about expansion and all. With this site, I know we have to treat it, both sites, we had to treat the water on site. I think we had room to be able to put in retention ponds. That's why there was a little bit more trees coming down versus the higher expense, my understanding, of putting in tanks underground because you have to treat the water. Where would those tanks go on this site?
They could go in different spots. I mean, yeah, it'll be all underground storm water retention systems. They can go in the green spaces that we have, the ovals. They can go in the parking.
Okay, can be that far away. I was worried about expansion or where the wells. You've pretty much taken the building side out. So
Yeah.
Okay.
I would imagine that we'd look at the left side of the building for the expansion of the fourth pod. And we would, I think, if that's a direction from the board, that we would show that dashed in all of our drawings so that we're not conflicting with it for future build.
Any other questions about sort of the preliminary designs?
No, I don't see any.
Okay. So we also just wanted to kind of update you on the schedule. So this is the revised schedule. This is sort of the schedule that we talked about previously, which was sort of taking design development through basically July of this year. So the idea was that we would take the building through design development through July, and then in August, Harvey would take another look at pricing and do a pricing exercise. We would be developing a really robust list of VE alternates, and Harvey would price those, and then we would come back together in September with those numbers and basically, you know, develop a budget for the project. So we can evaluate all those options and decide what is in and what is not in the building. Looking at the schedule overall, that means that you would be occupying the building in fall of 2029.
So I think this is, so, you know, building aid was not included in the governor's budget. You know, it is very expensive on taxpayers to go forward without building aid, which we've been trying to avoid doing. So I think one of the decisions the board is going to have to make is, you know, what, you know, we've always tried to be prepared for when building aid is there because it, you know, sort of comes and goes. But what work does it make sense to continue to do, and what should we not do? Because, you know, building codes could change, energy codes could change. So, I guess I'm looking for some thoughts on what's timeless and what's not. You know, and I don't know if the board is going to want to just stop all work or go full steam ahead, but I want us to make sure we have the option, you know, an understanding of the various options.
I think our recommendation to you would be to do the design development work, get to the estimate so that you can see where you are, put together, like Holly said, a really good list of everything that we can think of that could be taken out of the project so that you can see how low you can get the number. Some of the things may be horrible for you all to see, but and then go from there. Because at this point, we don't really know where we are because we've started this whole new site. And our site consultants really have to start from the beginning. I feel like the building piece, we can put back together in 5 months and get a really good estimate done. But that would be my recommendation to you so that you can make a good decision.
Do folks have thoughts, questions on that?
I do think maybe by then, too, you might see what would happen with the tax credits. That gives us a little bit more time to see how that, flushes out. We'll see what happens with all of the tariffs at that point, too. Harvey should maybe know what's going on with those.
They're off today, so. Matt?
I think one other thing we really should consider when we're talking about design development and all of that, we've got to, with this timeline that we just showed, we've got to keep that building alive, so to
Yes.
speak, for the next 4 years. So that's going to cost money too. So I think something we should consider is analysis to look at conditions. In the capital improvement plan and in the budget, we're asking to do a nuclear moisture test on the roof to get a thorough, good evaluation of it, but it doesn't just stop there. I'm concerned with, obviously, the leaks, and that's why we're talking about that, but I'm also concerned about those rooftop air handling units. We did that renovation back in 2010, but that was for the mechanical plant. It wasn't those rooftop units. So I would like to get third party or consider some sort of an analysis of what we have to look at and some sort of a prediction of what we're going to need to put into that building. Plumbing, electric. We, Linda, you know this, we blow fuses quite often up there year round, not just during the wintertime. So there's lots and lots of things to consider. So I think as we move ahead, we have to also pay attention to the needs of the building and see what we have to.
I think for the board, as it considers how it goes forward, to know how much it's going to cost us to, we've been planning to hoping we'd only have to keep it alive another 3 years. Right. So if it's 4, 6, 8, I think that becomes a question of how long we can wait for the state and throw good money after bad. But that would be good information to have.
Maybe you want to do 2 different studies so you see how much it takes to keep it alive for 4 years if this is built versus 8 years if you're waiting for funding. And then, the escalation of this project if you wait that long as well. Because 4 years of escalation on this is $20 million.
Maybe.
Yeah.
You can't see this.
Maybe.
That's.
Tina, did they put the costs of the modulars in those? Would they include those? I mean, you.
We can get you a number. I don't have it off the top of my head, but the next time we see all of you, I can tell you how much it costs for
I would like to know
modulars.
that.
Do you have?
So we studied that for another project last year, maybe even the year before. So it might be out of date costs, but they haven't gone down. And we were looking at 2 modulars, 2 classrooms for a year is about $250,000.
And you're thinking we
This
need
was-
a whole wing, so that's
This was like
8 to 10
16,
classrooms.
it was 16 pods. I forget what
16.
Bobby had said was in that area. 16 classrooms. So do the math. And
that's
again,
buying them.
nope, that's renting them.
That's renting them. So that's
Yes.
$250,000 a year.
$250,000 a year for 2 classrooms. And that study was done a couple years ago. So it's not any less than that. So I just want to share that with you.
Because the building department will look at those as like a permanent building, so you'll have to make them function like a permanent building code-wise. So you'll have to put in full foundations, fire sprinklers, the whole 9 yards.
They don't come with fire sprinklers. Gold-plated fire sprinklers.
No, I've dealt with this before, and modulars are like $10,000 a month. Restrooms?
Right, they could put them in the modulars too.
Yeah.
Yep.
But that would be extra.
That'd be extra.
Okay. Awesome.
To refresh some memories, we did put modulars too at Abbott Downing when we were doing that project. Fire code changed the snow load of the roof to meet local code and all the other regulations, fire alarm system and that kind of thing. So they are costly.
Very costly. cost.
Linda, did you have a?
Yeah, so we are running on deficient equipment and technology that doesn't work and furniture that's falling apart. And I'm wondering if there's anything that can be done to fix those deficiencies now that could then be put into a new building later so that we're not still operating on what we have, but if that's something that can be considered, you know, that furniture that we're going to get eventually, could we get sooner so that we can then move it to the building? Or a smart board that I don't have to keep unplugging because this has been going on for 8 years now, and everything has been kept putting off.
Right.
Because you're going to get a new building. You're going to get a new building. And honestly, I'm not feeling confident right now about getting a new building. And I'm going to be very honest there. And so if we're not going to get a new building in 3 years, which we're definitely not, maybe 4, we can't still keep operating under this. But we're going to get a new building, so we're going to hold out until then. We can't do that. So if we can start looking at somehow taking care of things now that can move into a new building, I know that teachers and students would appreciate it.
Well, I think that's certainly something that Matt can look at and we have done certain things, you know, particularly around security upgrades there that we have tried to make them portable.
Right, security-wise, but in regards to educationally,
Yep.
you know, what we're trying to work with, you don't want surgeons working with rusty tools, right? And not to compare myself to a surgeon, but hopefully you get the analogy.
Training future surgeons.
I am, hopefully, right? And so if we could have what we need now, that would be
I don't know if
preferred.
the smart board is a smart board issue or if it's an electrical issue.
Yeah, I don't know either, but just we keep hearing the eventually. So.
We could definitely look at that.
Yeah.
We hear you. We see it too.
Other thoughts, comments? Tina, Holly?
So this slide, Holly's gonna have to redo the numbers because no one can see this, but we can hand it out to you. So this new school in 2017, project cost was?
New school in 2017, $75 million, $75,820,662.
And then in 2021?
Oh, sorry, in 2021, the new building was $104 million.
And then in 22?
176.
24?
152.
25?
164.
If you wait 4 more years, we're gonna add 20 million to that bottom number. The problem when we have, you know, tariffs like this or when we had COVID, all those numbers went up like drastically and they've never come down.
Yeah.
And, you know, I can't say why that is, but people, maybe it's the unpredictability of things. You know, subs have not really lowered their numbers. When the tariffs make the steel more expensive, it's not going to come back down. So the cost of doing nothing is challenging.
And that 20 million, is that a pre-tariff estimate or
Yes,
a post-tariff?
it's pre-tariff.
As is the 164 million, I'm assuming. Yep. Okay.
Yeah, and we can try to get the 164 down. Like I said, I think the goal would be to try to find every VE possible and maybe make some really
Could you just define VE?
value engineering. So we'd look at things like, well, what if you put in a gas-fired boiler instead of doing any kind of geothermal or something? What if you put in a VRF system instead of, you know, a displacement system? So HVAC options. What if you made the theater smaller? What if you, I don't know, what if you made the whole backside of the building out of, you know, CMU on the exterior and the front was brick? Things that we could reduce the cost of the building. They may not be all palatable to you. We would try to keep everything educationally intact. But if it means doing some of these really hard things and you can get a new school that functions, then maybe that's what you have to do.
Other questions? You have anything else for us today?
Nope.
All right. Well, then I. Yes, I know. Somebody was saying, "How's the school board?" And I said, "We had the best meeting on Monday night. It was so much fun. We had food. We had kids. It was so great." So back to reality.
I do actually have one more thing.
Oh,
though.
okay.
If we want to keep to that schedule that we talked about,
Yep.
we do need a green light to move forward. And I know that's a board decision. That's not this group. But I do want to get my consultants going, and I haven't done that yet because I want to make sure people are good with us continuing. So we have been working on it, but in order to get the full team going, I want to hear from you that that's the direction you want to take.
And I think the information we asked for about, those various cost scenarios would be very helpful so that we could bring that to the full board and maybe then reconvene this group when we have that information so they could make a recommendation to the board about various ways we could go.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
But Tina's just saying that to move forward with just the design phase, right? Is that what you're
Design
saying?
development.
Just the design
So
development.
that we can
So
get
do
to
we
an
still
estimate
need-
in August.
So do we still need those?
Well, we can bring that to the board. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. But it would be
Because I'd like to see the design, that everything that Tina said about getting to that design and moving forward as soon as possible.
Yeah.
And then we could look at it from there of, okay, what is the price now? There's
But-
no sense in delaying that.
But now you're spending money on a design when you may never ever build it.
Well,
That would be the
I want
question
to
the
keep
board
moving
has
forward.
to
To Linda's
face.
point, I want to keep moving forward.
Well, and that's probably a
Well,
discussion for
Well,
the
that'll be a discussion for the board.
Yeah.
We knew that building at the South Street site was gonna be a lot more expensive than the other site. Now we're just seeing it, so probably we're gonna,
Yeah.
the community wanted us
That's
to
what the
move
community
forward
wanted.
without, knowing, well, they wanted us to move forward knowing that the cost was more expensive. So that'll come up to the board.
But I think we need Harvey to price the South Street site. I think we actually, we can't just do a guesstimate at it. We need to
No.
we need to really draw something for them to price and get a good set of numbers on, because maybe it's not 164, maybe it's $1 million less than that, or
And we don't know what we can, whatever the VE out of it.
Well, the problem is.
Right? So but we need to have some cost, so we
We
need a
get-
design.
yeah.
So I would like to bring that to the board ASAP so we can move forward with that before we can start cost cutting.
Do we need, the thing is that, traffic. There's some pretty big possible expenses on traffic on this location.
But that will all come after the design.
I would like to get the traffic engineer looking at this so they can help us route the
But I
roads in.
guess-
And
I'm
look at
asking, do we need that
getting-
before the design, or do we need it, when do we need that in this?
We need it in this design development
Design
phase.
development's gotta be
So
part of it.
we had given, Jack our fee for this next phase with all of the consultant numbers in it. We need RFS to look at, the mechanical engineers to look at the possibilities for what systems we can have here. I want them to be able to look at the different options for systems and do the life cycle cost analysis again, because maybe we need to make some decisions about a different type of system to get the cost down.
I'd like to hear from Jack, again, he's not here right now, but regarding at what point does this become unaffordable, that the taxpayers are never going to bite on it, period, because we've eclipsed in a place where we can't go. I mean, we can't see $8 or $10 1,000 increases to the taxpayer here in town, no matter what. So you can forget the school altogether if that's where we're headed. And until we know more about what the impact on the tax is going to be without state funding, I think it's a waste of money to spend any more money until we know what the tax burden
I
is
am
going to be.
sure Jack will have that for us at
But we also don't know what the actual cost is till we go through this design.
But-
to be able to then bump it down further to
But
then
we
have
know what
another
it needs
assessment.
to be under, otherwise the project's unaffordable. And so you've got to go to whatever design they started with. You can throw the baby out with the bathwater because we can't afford it.
I mean, the problem is we're going to have a couple of unaffordable options because we have to do something with this school. And we don't know when the state will. So I think that's the question that we have to get I think,
Well,
more.
What do we need to get to
Yeah.
without the state?
Yeah.
That's what I want to hear from Jack. Where do we need to be without state assistance to be able to make this palatable so that the city of Concord will vote, yes, let's build a school?
So we,
You mean like a target number?
Yeah.
Yeah.
What's the target number
Yeah,
that?
I want to know, where is it? Because I already know that $165 million is just not in my wheelhouse. I mean, I'm retired on a fixed income. I can't afford, that massive an increase. I'd sell my house in a minute and leave town because I couldn't afford to stay here any more than I could stay in Hopkinton. So we've got to get this number down to a palatable place if we're going to have to do it without state funding.
Yep.
But that valuable place is going to be different for everyone.
Yes, but
And what in the renovation, if it costs the same as that, like I don't disagree.
renovation will cost more.
So then
And you'll get
we
a thing
eventually
of both.
the students will not be able to be in that building. So I look at it as like we have to do this as fast as possible before there's another
But you
20
have
million.
to do it in an affordable school at the fastest pace.
But yeah, but I don't know what
we're arguing over,
Yeah.
I just wanna
Boston
move
town
forward with
for
the
$1 billion,
design.
okay, when they told me it was half $1 billion. I don't wanna go there. Concord can't afford it either. We can't get to $200 million and expect the taxpayers to sit still for it. So we need to be able to know what's that number that we can probably sell to the town before we authorize spending more money, in my opinion.
and that will go to the board, and the board, and we're gonna have to we will look at those numbers, I think, and look at the estimates for continuing design, but I think for that board discussion, like, it would be very helpful to know, like, if this project gets delayed, what that you are doing now might we have to repeat? Because I think that's the question. If the studies that you're doing through design, like, if we have to wait 3 years, how much of that are we going to have to pay for again? And that's a question that I have before going.
I think the question Rick's asking, which, I hear what he's saying, is if the city can afford, or the board thinks we can pay $120 million without building aid, if that's the number that they sort of were thinking, does it make some sense to ask then the architects to design us that building?
There you go.
As opposed to having them design what it is we originally wanted,
Yep.
when we thought we might get building aid and we thought, things might be different? Or is it better to have them continue with this plan and then cut?
Right.
I guess that's, because I could see value in let's design the building we can afford. It may not have a theater, it may not have all these things that we all wish we could have, but if that's what we can afford, that's the building we should be designing instead of designing and then cutting.
Agreed.
Thank you.
Love it.
I agree. And can the building that gets designed that we can afford leave space for adding in the things that we can afford eventually later on should resources become more available?
Yeah, I'm sure we can look at that. I think everyone should be very clear that if we build a building without a theater or without a those things are probably not going to happen for 20, 30 years. So, and we looked at subtracting those, and as we look at this, one of the values that we had was we wanted something that we weren't going to be paying to redo again in 30 years. So, we're going to have to figure out what those trade-offs are too, so.
I would say we can do a little investigation into the building code and see if there's any new versions coming out in the next couple of years. That's the only thing I could imagine that would require some changes to the drawings if we finish the drawings next year and they sat for a year or something. I think the stormwater, all of those kind of codes just changed. So, but we can do that kind of investigation and let you know.
Thank you. Anything else? Jay?
I remember saying it like over a year ago that these are like historical decisions because this building is going to be the middle school not just for the next 20, 30, 40 years, but probably the next 60, 70 years. And I know it's a great burden and, these are really, really hard decisions, but I think of that, and I know all of you do too. This is really tough, but this middle school is going to be our middle school and our capital for a long time.
And we did have a lot of these value discussions the last time, and it, when it came down to it, people were like, well, it's going to cost us more to do cement than pavers over the long run, or to do concrete versus granite. But we may have to do the cheaper version, and those will be costs that people will have to pay later. So, so lots to think about. Seeing nothing else, I'm going to adjourn us for the evening. Thank you.
Thank you.
Oh, no, I just have to say that. I'm responsible for this.
If we're gonna go another year down the road and then everyone's gonna get back to it.
Good.
No,